Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to be talking about Magic the Gathering versus Yu-Gi-Oh!, comparing specifically the two games. And we're going to talk about the game itself and compare them, and actually I will choose a winner and a loser on what is the best game. This is going to focus on the game itself, just the cards. I'm excluding the shows that are the extra media that is connected to this, and I'm also excluding the communities. This is just the game, all right? So I've played Magic the Gathering for all 26 years that the game has existed. And I have played Yu-Gi-Oh! For 1 year, all right? I am proficient at both games. I've played in tournaments, and I've played casual in both. I feel confident that I know enough about both games to compare them. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed. All right, we're going to talk about the world, we're going to talk about the rules, and we're going to talk about format. I have a mnemonic that I'm going to use to remind myself to hit all my points. Whirling Mana, lifting up Stanley Tucci, who is wearing a rainbow coat made of solitaire cards. All right, thanks for your patience with that. Let me get moving forward here. So let's talk about the worlds. Okay, so the world of Magic the Gathering is essentially very close to Tolkien's world, with a little more spice and a little more fantasy thrown in there, but it's a fantasy-based world, right? Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a science fiction setting that has fantasy elements. Okay, now here's the thing: I actually think that the Yu-Gi-Oh! World is better, and the reason why is because it is set in the future. It can logically include fantasy elements, right? Because we have things right now that are very strongly influenced from our past, right? And so when a futuristic setting says we're going to include these fantasy elements, something that would have happened in the past, or something that's more based around medieval European fantasy, it makes more logical sense and it allows the world to be more consistent. Whereas if Magic the Gathering had kept their world as a fantasy-based world, it could have been a consistent world, but they didn't do that. They've added cyberpunk, they've added machines, they've added a lot of futuristic elements to Magic the Gathering world, and it makes absolutely no sense because it's called Magic the Gathering, and you're supposed to be a planeswalker, and you're supposed to be using actual magic, right? So when you take futuristic elements and put them into a fantasy setting, they really look out of place. And I feel like the world is really not consistent. Magic the Gathering's world is not that consistent. Whereas there's lots of crazy stuff in Yu-Gi-Oh!, but there's a logical reason why they could be there. Essentially it's placed into the future, right? And it has futuristic elements, so almost any kind of magical aspects can be explained by nanotechnology or things like that. So technology can absolutely give you effects that seem like magic, but when you have a world that is supposed to be fantastical and magical, based around like what Tolkien was going at, and there's a lot of key elements within magic that link to Tolkien, and then you add machines to it, it doesn't make sense because those machines would logically make the magic break. And so I just feel that Yu-Gi-Oh!'s world is more consistent, right? It just makes more sense, right? And by the way, before we go any further, I like both of these games, and I think they're both very good. But I will say this: playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Has very much opened my eyes to many of the problems that exist within Magic the Gathering, and having played Magic the Gathering, it is very easy for me to see problems that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has as well. All right, let's keep it moving. All right, so that's the world, right? Let's talk about the rules. I have two areas about the rules I want to talk about: mana, colors, and so Whirling Mana, lifting Stanley Tucci, who's wearing a rainbow. Okay, let's talk about the rules. So we need to talk about mana, color, and solitaire. All right. So first and foremost, mana, right? Mana is in Magic the Gathering, the lands, right? What do you use to power your spells? What do you use to cast creatures? Well, Magic the Gathering has a narrative form, right? And actually, they have the plains, the forests, the mountains, the islands, and the swamps, right? It really makes the cards beautiful. The land cards in Magic the Gathering are beautiful, and narratively they fit, and it makes sense why you're casting the mana, why you're casting spells in the way you do. So you set down these lands, you're drawing power from the lands as a planeswalker, and then your spell goes forward. So narratively, it makes sense, right? From a rules perspective, mana is a nightmare. It is an absolute nightmare. And now that I've played enough Yu-Gi-Oh!, I will tell you right now, I truly believe that putting lands into Magic the Gathering is, without a doubt, a mistake, right? I absolutely think the game could be much more robust and complex and a better game overall if mana was not in Magic the Gathering. It causes all kinds of problems. So one, it takes up a third of the deck, right? And the reality is, it takes up a third of the deck. It's a problem, right? And essentially, they're filler cards. So every deck in Magic the Gathering, a third of the deck is filler cards, right? And I'm fully aware of, creature lands and dual lands and all the different things they've done with them. But the reality is, not only are they filler cards, in my opinion, but also they very arbitrarily make the game much more expensive. And every time you go to buy a new deck, you're buying additional special lands. It jacks up the price on every single deck, and you are really not getting much excitement for the game, right? The land, they're terrible. They're filler cards, and now they've played Yu-Gi-Oh! I truly believe Magic the Gathering would be a much, much better game without lands, right? If there was just some other way, if the game had figured out some other way to deal with mana, or even if it had just been rolling dice or whatever it was, those land cards are absolutely terrible. I love the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not have mana. Okay, so colors, right? Magic the Gathering has colors, right? This is a much, much better aspect for Magic the Gathering than Yu-Gi-Oh! The fact that Magic is split into red, blue, white, black, green. I am aware that the colors actually come from the land, right? But the fact that you have those 5 primary colors, this is handled much, much better in Yu-Gi-Oh! In Magic the Gathering than it is handled in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Has dark, fire, it has these different types, right? But they're hard to see on the cards, and there's really no equivalent in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game of the colors, and the way that it's executed in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very, very poor. The color scheme, how they're interposed against each other in Magic, it's really brilliant. It works really well. It is better than Yu-Gi-Oh! Without a doubt, okay? Both games suffer from solitaire. What is solitaire? That is when one player just kicks back and goes into 5, 10, 15 minutes of card manipulation with very little interaction from the opponent, right? Solitaire is a little worse on the Yu-Gi-Oh! It's actually considerably worse on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Side than it is on the Magic side. And on the Magic side, it's just very arbitrary, right? So there's a lot of solitaire being played with blue players, right? Whereas in Yu-Gi-Oh!, there's a lot of solitaire being played on both sides, right? And they both have essentially like a stack. They both have the ability to respond and things like that. But overall, the solitaire problem is a little worse in Yu-Gi-Oh! Than it is in Magic the Gathering, right? Now, overall, which game has a better rule system? I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a better rule system. And it all comes down to that, to the mana. Once I saw a collectible card game that runs without mana, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Does, it's so much better. It's so much more enjoyable. Lands are terrible. I always thought that when I played Magic the Gathering, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Really taught me lands are the worst. It's not a good aspect of the game. All right. So I actually think Yu-Gi-Oh! has a better rule system as well. Okay. All right. Formats. All right. Which game has a better format, right? So Magic the Gathering has standard, it has modern, It has Commander, right? Those are, and it has even more formats than that, right? Yu-Gi-Oh really doesn't have many formats at all. I think it has some formats that play a little faster, but the reality is, the biggest thing with the format for Yu-Gi-Oh is there is no standard for Yu-Gi-Oh, right? So your cards don't cycle out, right? They just go onto a ban. Just some selection of those cards go on the ban list, and Yu-Gi-Oh uses the ban list much more strategically than Magic the Gathering does, because Magic the Gathering will cycle your cards out every 2 years, and it has this standard format, right? Well, I understand why the standard format is there, right? I think, and from a profit perspective, standard is much better for Magic the Gathering for Wizards of the Coast to make money. It actually, from a commercial perspective, it's clearly better, right? But from a player's perspective, standard is pretty bad. Now, I'm an engaged player. I play standard in Magic when I play Magic the Gathering. I fully understand it, and me and everyone in my family, pretty much, I would say 5 out of 6 people in my family play Magic the Gathering. We all know how to deal with standard. But boy, if you're a new player and you come in and you try to play Friday Night Magic, you can, if you found some cards in your house and you built a deck, you walk into Friday Night Magic, your deck's illegal right out of the gate, right? And you have to buy new cards. That stinks, right? Whereas Yu-Gi-Oh, if you're a new player and you just bought some cards at a garage sale and you walk into a tournament or into even into a casual game, there's a much better chance that your cards, since there is no standard, you're not disqualified immediately. At least you have a chance that your deck's going to be legal. So I actually like that Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't have standard. I understand there's a lot of problems with the banned list, but here's the thing: Magic has a banned list too, right? So Magic is cycling your cards out every 2 years, and in addition to that, it has a banned list, right? So it still has a banned list, just like Yu-Gi-Oh does, right? So on this one as well, Yu-Gi-Oh wins, right? So Yu-Gi-Oh wins on World, Yu-Gi-Oh wins on Rules, Yu-Gi-Oh wins on Format, right? Now I'm going to take 100 points and I'm going to split them up between Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic, right? And I think you'll be surprised where it lands. Yu-Gi-Oh is a better game than Magic the Gathering, period, end of sentence. But not by much. Here's the issue. If I take 100 points, I would give Yu-Gi-Oh 53 points and I would give Magic 47 points. So here's why. Yu-Gi-Oh is a much, much better game than Magic the Gathering, with absolutely atrocious execution on the part of Konami. Okay, Magic the Gathering is a significantly worse game than Yu-Gi-Oh, with absolutely stellar execution on the part of Wizards of the Coast. So Wizards of the Coast is executing a worse game better, and Yu-Gi-Oh is executing a better game worse, right? So overall, Yu-Gi-Oh is the winner, right? But the score is 53-47, right? So it's fairly close. I love both these games. I feel really fortunate to have played both of these games. They are both really unique. I encourage anyone to try either one. But honestly, if I had to choose, I think Yu-Gi-Oh is the better game. It's also interesting. Yu-Gi-Oh, even in the rules, just the game itself, right? It has very strong Japanese influence, whereas Magic the Gathering has very strong American influence. So actually, I'm from that perspective, I'm a little surprised as an American to be picking the Japanese game as a better one. But that's my. But all of that is my opinion. Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm wrong? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.